Hello there. If any of you are like me, and I know some of you are, you spent a lot of time perusing the toy aisles. Maybe because mom left you there while she shopped, or maybe on your own. I know we couldn't always get something, but just dreaming about the next action figure was satisfying enough. Some of these are the most memorable toy lines that we still talk about today, and others just simply slip through the cracks. Toy lines that have passed us by, that we're oblivious to until we were much older, much later in life. You may recognize these now, but for a long time, many of these were unknown and still need to be seen to be believed. I'm Victor, and straight out of the Gen Experience, action figures that you've probably never heard of. Toys and toy lines that will surprise you, or maybe trigger a memory you've long since forgotten. Here are 11 unknown and unbelievable action figure toys and toy lines so obscure you'll wonder if they should remain forgotten. A poster of Magnum PI dominated our utility room growing up. My mom hung it above the washing machine. You've probably seen it. Mustached Tom Selleck suggestively holding his pistol. I don't want to imagine her thoughts while doing the delicates, but because of this I ask, who greenlit the Magnum PI action figure? Well, it came from LJN in 1983, but moms weren't buying this, were they? I could have seen the figure in the toy store, and I definitely knew the show, but I wasn't the target audience, I don't think. They didn't even add the helicopter, Rick, TC, Higgins, or even his dogs, so even with the red Ferrari, I wasn't adding Magnum to my Christmas list. Then again, I didn't even remember they made one. If you want one today, it will cost you a pretty penny. Wait, they don't make those anymore. A nifty nickel then. How many of you are still holding on to your Magnums? Kenner had made the large-size $6 million man action figure, so why not make a Colt Severs? Oh, because most young people who watched that were not thinking of toys. They were thinking of Heather Thomas. This hour-long action comedy crime show was a hit in prime time, and somebody had the bright idea to turn the stuntman into an action figure. And that someone was Ertl. Although there was a carded version, you didn't want that atrocity. You wanted the 10-point articulated version of the Lee Majors character that came with the truck. You had to have the truck, and it was metal too. No, not Wayne Newton as a subscriber described him to be, but frankly the figure is well detailed, with a mold similar to other articulated action figures of the era. Not a horrible likeness, but also not attractive. Which is unfortunate since one of my other viewers said it reminded them of Pedro Pascal. Ugh, that doesn't say much for Pedro. Best to move along. But where are his buddies, or even his hat? The Severs action figure uses the same mold as Ertl's own Wrangler figure, which explains the W on his belt, but not why he is Sans hat. Now, if this toy line wasn't going to make Heather's Jody character into an action figure, at least produce an Elvira one from that kooky special Halloween episode. I mean, Colt Severs is a pretty random TV character to make one action figure of, so why not Elvira too? Having a Fall Guy action figure was a first, and a last. How many of you have this little treasure? No, not Tron, but you can't say there isn't a little game grid in Automan. Automan is well known in the annals of short-lived sci-fi TV that on paper seemed like a hit. On screen, however, one season was all it could muster, even with a co-star from Hollywood royalty. Desi Arnaz Jr. as police officer Walter, the computer programmer who created the titular character, as well as two other suits, were promised on the card back as future releases, but just weren't interesting enough to warrant making. Maybe Automan would have been more engaging if he turned into a helicopter or a car or a motorcycle. That isn't to say there wasn't a whole line of role-playing toys in this franchise, but nothing more for your Automan to do but ride light cycles with your Flynn and Tron toys. But that wasn't going to be easy. The whole 1983 line was available only to our UK friends. Even while the show played in the United States and seemed right up the Gen X kid alley. Capitalizing on that look and feel of Tron can't be blamed for the failure of the show, but the show's failure may be to blame on the lack of sales for the Automan toy line and the cancellation of the additional figures. Unlike most of those on this list, he wasn't 3 3/4 inch, but a little closer to He-Man's scale at 5.5, albeit a bit trimmer to more closely resemble the actor Chuck Wagner. This was a hit, and kids loved it. Early in prime time, Chips garnered viewers of all ages, and Ponch and John were heroes to the young and old as they worked to keep California's highways safe while reinforcing the classic sexy motorcycle cop trope. Mego would produce some of their 8-inch action doll type figures with soft goods that had the expected level of success, even preparing a prototype of none other than Bruce Jenner when he joined the show for like a minute. If Caitlin ever wants her old face, she can always contact Mego. But the smaller scale action figures are not as remembered and could just be confused with the larger ones that ran concurrently. Well made with lots of articulation, like other Mego figures in this scale, the line was more than two hot cops, but included motorcycles, Chris Pine's dad, the Sarge, and even random baddies, Jimmy Squeaks and Wheels Willie to flesh out the ranks. The actors' appearances in variety of teen magazines and grocery store rags might have sustained their popularity, but the toy line was still short-lived. Now, who wasn't a Chips fan though, am I right? But who had these toys? We've brought these guys up before on the channel, but it still surprises some people that they were more than the usual Mego 8-inch action dolls, but also a robust, if not inconsistent, line of 3 3/4-inch figures. This show was perfect fodder for a toy line as the antics of Hazard County and its wrangle of rednecks. Oh, a wrangle? That's a group of rednecks, kind of like a gaggle of geese. You can't say the Gen experience didn't teach you something. Fun-loving, exciting adventures along with sex appeal from all sides. Bo and Luke lent their handsome appearances to fully articulate action figures, while Daisy was given the shaft, especially when it came to that version 1. Yikes! While most of the action figures are sculpted realistically, Daisy and the rest of the denizens of Hazard's citizens were all only given 5 points of articulation, while the Duke boys had at least 7. Better to slide over the hood and into the window of the General Lee, I suppose. This line had a good number of figures and vehicles, and had even promised a playset. But wow, just wow, this one blew my mind. And then I found out it's from Brazil and released in 1993, so I'm not sure how shocked I am anymore. It was a huge discovery when I first learned of this action figure. The card back is well done and the art of Richard Dean Anderson is noteworthy, but the figure itself? Someone must have bumped the machine when that face mold was being cast, because this guy's ugly. No, not this guy, that guy. It's easy to say the USA wouldn't even think about making a MacGyver action figure for kids, but after this list, what shocks me is they didn't. There were no less than 11 MacGyver toys in this line. Of course, there was only one MacGyver figure. No other characters were produced. Like many of the shows these toys derive from, MacGyver was more for the kid growing up, possibly beyond action figures. It was a well-respected show and has remained in pop culture throughout the decades. But an action figure, even just the one, seemed a bit of a stretch to sell to kids. At least I think that's who it was aimed for. Although the line included a MacGyver pocket knife, his figure came with nothing. No paperclip, no foil, no gum, no accessories at all. I guess he'll just have to improvise. I will admit I've covered this cast of lovable loonies on another show before, but I still think it will surprise most viewers that the entire cast of the zany cruise ship were a choice among so many others when they were released by Mego in 1981. The Loveboat action figures were a bit out of left field and probably should have set sail for the sunset before even being released. The lineup required Julie. No rolled up dollars, razor, or compact mirror included. But surprisingly, it also included Vicky. Unfortunately, with soft goods skirts made of, I don't know, what is that? Like burlap. Loveboat was camp, and we loved it. Those who brought these figures ashore during the first run must have felt lucky, especially if they still have them. But they'd be luckier to have even had the Pacific Princess cruise ship playset. At first glance, it looks like a pretty complete line, but when you factor in the lack of other figures, there are no passengers for the crew to get tangled up into humorous sexcapades with. It's just the crew of 7 on a big empty liner. I guess you could play with it like it was a ghost ship, and these poor souls are cursed to walk the decks alone for eternity. Or just use your Dukes figures as guests. Wait, what am I saying? They couldn't afford a cruise. Then again, imagine the TV show crossover possibilities with your Magnum PI or Colt Severs figure. It worked for Charlie's Angels. Now this line of well-dressed action figures is starting to sound more interesting. Hey everybody, it's Victor. Hope you're enjoying the show. Please interact with me here on YouTube in the comments or the posts, or even on Facebook and Instagram at The Gen Experience. Now, on with the show. If you've watched some of my videos before, you know that I have an almost complete collection of the MASH action figures from TriStar International from 1982. No vehicles or the actual base camp playset, but each of the characters with their meticulously crafted head molds. The sculpts of the entire figure are some of the best. BJ looks like BJ, Hawkeye looks like Hawkeye. They're pretty stunning. Just a hard sell to the younger set at the time, who might have been looking up the toy aisles for something other than a toy line of a surgical hospital show your parents watched about the Korean War. The line didn't go gangbusters, but it also released closer to the end of the series' run. To be fair, some kids could have gotten into the show by then. Although I don't have the shelf or the floor space to have the whole MASH unit playset, the little directional sign would kind of be cute. If I were to ever take them out of the packaging, that is. As for Corporal Klinger, you have to admit the Max and Drag figure was a bold move at the time and a hot ticket on the secondary market today. I should know, that's the only one I'm missing. Perhaps the closeted adult toy collectors back in the day knew how special they were and picked up these incredible figures from a show with an incredible legacy. Did you? And here we've got another girl. At least I think so. So far, Daisy Duke, Julie McCoy, and Vicky Stubing were the only females to come out of my ragtag group of TV show super celebrity action figures. Toys and toy lines that were so easily forgettable that most people didn't even know they existed rarely had female figures. However, that wasn't always the case. Like here, the A-Team toy line was actually one of the most successful on this whole list, maybe followed only by the Dukes of Hazzard. But that success goes more to the 6-inch figures by Galoob than their 3 3/4-inch option. The 6-inch are aesthetically unattractive with their barrel-trunked physiques, but were offered in show-accurate looks that were more recognizable than their small-scale versions, clad in some bright colors, but with plenty of action and accessory packs. The A-Team action figures are not that unknown, but what is almost completely overlooked is Amy Allen. The larger scale surprises many with the inclusion of a female character right out of the gate. Not unheard of, but rare, and an admirable gamble. Amy was a main character, a reporter featured in the first 2 seasons when she was represented in plastic. Looking at the box though, you might think you're getting Vasquez from Aliens, but the toy better represents what we saw in the show than this odd image choice. Were they trying to convince potential boy buyers that this was just another male action star from the series? Noting some female action figures at the time, it was often hard to tell. Overall, it's not bad. She fared better than this guy. Females were often shipped in lower quantities, so she may be a rare grail in the collector world today. Not Lady Gaga, but Mork from Ork, another lone figure from a popular TV show, but this one stands above the rest. Or just on his head. Unique not only for coming with an egg, but because he is from a sitcom. That's right, most of these action figures come from a variety of hour-long primetime programming. Even early primetime didn't have the toy representation, until Mork, that is. Mego had gone into that territory with their 8-inch action dolls of plastic and soft goods, but when it comes to the 3 3/4-inch, Mork was different, obviously. We weren't getting Nell Carter of Gimme a Break or Ricky Stratton of Silver Spoons action figures, just Mork. And sadly, there was no Mindy, no Jeep, no house playset. Mork came clad in his Orkian spacesuit, although his striped shirt and suspenders may have done well alongside a Mindy action figure. So, what was your play pattern with Mork? He fits on the bridge of Galactica nicely, a toy line we have covered here before. His buck and spacesuit even resemble that of Adama's. Once with your Galactica gang, they could all join forces with your Star Wars guys and in true Gen X experience style, build up your ranks and have them all fight as one.
Nanu, nanu.
Now this is Amazeballs. I loved watching Knight Rider. What a ride! And I'm not just talking about Kit. Every time I was in my family car, I pretended any control on the dashboard was turbo boost. Very much like Magnum, Michael Knight was sold on card alone and with his Trans Am kit in a box set. Although not as articulate as Tom Selleck's little likeness, Michael's resemblance to David Hasselhoff is honestly better than expected, especially that huge head. No, that's not a backstop, that's Hasselhoff's ego. Large noggin aside, his red turtleneck and leather jacket are perfect, reminding me that although he did change clothes in the series, this was his main look. By this time, you can tell that some of the norm was to have only one main character figure released, but I'm still surprised more characters from the series didn't make it into the line. Although, to be fair, besides Devon, there was a frequent co-star changeover on that show. And who was clamoring for a Devon figure anyway? I would have loved to have this one and Kit. But today I'm pretty happy with my Transformers crossover collaboration, Agent Knight. Who loved Knight Industries 2000 enough to add Michael and Kit to their collection during its initial release? Or who has one today? Anyone? Anyone? Like so many toys of the 70s and 80s that I dreamed about getting but never did, the large-scale V action figure with lizard face reveal was one of them. However, even having the large-sized Star Wars figures, I was really into the smaller toys. The small scale was definitely easier to acquire, to transport, and to combine with other franchises and brands to play. Because I used to play the Donovan character when we acted out V on our school playground, the promise of the smaller scale V figures was one I counted on. But alas, the ads and the catalogs weren't meant to be. The toys were canceled, the show was canceled, but they can never cancel our memory of evil Diana eating a hamster as a snack. Did I miss any crazy TV superstar celebrity action figure from prime time? Are there more? I had already covered Buck Rogers and Battlestar Galactica in another video, but they are too well known to be in this show. I'm still shocked about how many TV show characters that were not cartoons were made into action figures. I was oblivious about many of these figures until I got much older. I bet some of these are complete surprises to some viewers too. You might even be in shock they made some of them at all. But it was the golden age of action figures after all. Everything was on the table. Their longevity doesn't surprise me. Most didn't last and are often ignored or completely forgotten today, and maybe they're the kind that should remain a mystery. What do you think? And what did you think of the show? If you liked it, click the like. If you didn't, just move on to another channel. This was the Gen Experience, where everything worth talking about today came from. Click the subscribe and tell me which of these you had or wish you had. And until next time.